Welcome to our Theological Institute here at Holy Family Catholic Church, where we're concluding our 3-week study on the history of Independent Catholicism. We remember that we are celebrating the 300th anniversary of something. So 300 years ago is 1724. What happened in 1724, 300 years ago? There was a Roman Catholic bishop, Dominique Marie Varlet, a French bishop who consecrated other bishops in the Netherlands, where they had no bishop for over 20 years. He confirmed over 600 people, saw they didn't have a bishop, so he consecrated a bishop for them. The only challenge was that he didn't get Rome's permission for the consecration that he did. So now we had bishops who were consecrated outside without the permission of the Roman Catholic Church, but they were validly consecrated according to Roman Catholic canon law. That was in 1724, and that was up in the Netherlands. So we'll try drawing out the Europe here. That's the Iberian Peninsula, that's the Alps. Here's Italy with Rome down in Italy. Up in the Netherlands is where they consecrated a new bishop. And then last class we talked about how it was that this old Catholicism, these old Catholics who were retrieving the practices and the beliefs of the ancient church, they believed that the Roman Catholic Church was creating a new religion, largely through the 1870 sham Vatican Council, when they declared the Pope infallible and when they declared the Bishop of Rome to be the universal head of the church. And so now that the Roman Catholics had created a new religion, let's be faithful Catholics, faithful to the old teachings of the ancient church. And so last week we talked about how it was that this old Catholicism, which was in the Netherlands, Germany, Switzerland, Austria, Northern Europe, all above the Alps, had spread first to the United States of America with Joseph René Valat and his founding of the American Catholic Church. And then it went to England and then to the United States through Arnold Harris Matthew, who was consecrated after that. Both of them, Valat was ordained by the Old Catholic Bishop of Switzerland and then consecrated over in Sri Lanka, present-day Sri Lanka. Arnold Harris Matthew was consecrated by the Archbishop of Utrecht for the Old Catholics of England, but shortly after being consecrated, he decided to be independent of the Roman Catholic Church and of the Old Catholic Church. Both of them reconciled with the Roman Catholic Church. That brought us to the end, roughly, of the 19th century. So where we pick up tonight is with the events of 1897, Scranton, Pennsylvania. Have you heard of that place? Who do we know who's from Scranton, Pennsylvania?
Joe Biden.
Joseph Robinette Biden is from Scranton, Pennsylvania. What happened in Scranton, Pennsylvania in 1897? A Roman Catholic priest and Polish immigrant, Francis Hodor, founded an independent Polish Catholic group in Scranton, Pennsylvania, which grew to 20,000 members. The Polish didn't feel that they were being heard by the German and Irish bishops at that time here in the United States. And so they, and not only there in Scranton, Pennsylvania, but in Pennsylvania and New York principally, but in other places throughout the United States, the Polish people felt ill-served. Many of them had parishes named after Saint Stanislaus, the patron saint of Poland, and many of them became independent of the Roman Catholic Church. The Polish National Catholic Church grew quickly to about 20,000 members. He was consecrated a bishop by the Archbishop of Utrecht. So now that he had a group of 20,000, we'll add him to the list here. Hodor went to the Archbishop of Utrecht, said, we have 20,000 Catholics. We no longer are Roman Catholic. Will you consecrate me a bishop? Traveled over to Utrecht, was consecrated, and now we had another independent Catholic bishop leading a large church in the United States. Are they still in relationship with Utrecht or not? Because Utrecht, the Church of Germany and then the Church of Netherlands in 1996 ordained the first women clergy in Europe. 1996, that's within our lifetimes, within the past 30 years. And with that, in 1996, that was when this increasingly conservative Polish National Catholic Church in the United States said, nah, we can no longer be in a relationship with Utrecht. Which is why it's an important distinction. We talk about independent Catholicism. In this world of concentric circles, independent Catholicism are one thing. Within the world of independent Catholicism is inclusive Catholics, people like ourselves who do see women as deserving of all sacraments of the Church. So we are inclusive Catholics. The Polish National Catholic Church would consider themselves independent Catholics, but they would not be inclusive in the same way that we are.
But they respect each other?
Oh, certainly we respect one another as sister churches. As expressions of Catholicism in the ancient church, the Catholic Church was diverse, and we didn't believe that everyone had to believe the same thing, right? Our community could believe certain things. You could have different practices, right? We'd each have our own identity, but we were all Catholic. That was in 1897. Ready to flash forward to the 19 teens. So this is now about the time of World War I finishing up. We had here in the United States, in Great Britain and in the United States, a movement called Theosophy. And we just want to pause there because Theosophy and independent Catholicism would get wrapped up together in a thing that we called the liberal Catholic Church at that time. Theosophy was a hybrid or syncretism of world religions. It's been defined as Western thought with an Eastern flavor. At that time, what was happening in the 1860s and 70s was we were learning about Asian cultures, and their religions and their philosophies were coming now into the United States. So we were learning about these. And we were thinking, wait a minute, there's a lot of wisdom in what we've gotten from the East, a lot of wisdom with what we've gotten from the West. How do we, with our religious tradition, how do we bring them together? Theosophy was an attempt to do that. Take a look at that word. Theos means what? Theos is the Greek word for?
Theos.
Theos, theology?
Theology.
Theology is the study of what? God. So God, theosophy, Sophia. In Greek, what is Sophia? Philosophy. Sophia is wisdom. So this was the study of the wisdom of God, knowing that the wisdom of God is bigger than any one religion. How it is that all world religions, including all these Asian religions that we were learning about, could tell us something about God. And so Theosophy was bringing together Eastern and Western religions, was teaching various things about, reincarnation and chakras and all sorts of things that we hadn't heard before in these United States of America necessarily. It was created in New York City in 1875, often associated with esotericism, the occult. The occult, how would you define that? There was very much there was an interest in spiritual things like communicating with the dead and ghosts and spirits. There was a big interest in this back in the late 19th century.
Like witchcraft?
And they also believe that all of these world religions had sort of like some secret things that they all had in common, and that we could look at masters, what they called masters, who taught us wisdom, who gave us wisdom from various traditions. So you could point to a person like Jesus and say, oh, Jesus was a master, or that these other people over in Asia were masters, etc.
Like Confucius.
Like the Buddha, Confucius, etc. That all these people were masters from whom we could learn a great deal. So they believed in various masters who evolved people of wisdom with supernatural powers. After the death of their founder, Elena Blavatsky, Annie Besant is a name. She came to the United States from England to start gathering support for Theosophy in the United States. And in the United States, she would meet a man named Charles Ledbetter, and they wrote several books together. Ledbetter was with the Theosophical Society for a moment, resigned in 1907, fascinating story that we won't go into this evening, rejoined them again in 1908, traveled to India, over here, where he met a young boy on a beach whose name was Jiddu Krishnamurti, and Ledbetter suggested that this boy was destined to be a messianic world teacher. And so Ledbetter dedicated himself to educating this boy, being his tutor for a few years in India. This boy would later grow up and as an adult would deny being a master. You can Google all these people and read their stories on Wikipedia. But the fascinating thing about this bishop, who found himself now in India, was that later he moved to Australia, where he was consecrated an independent Catholic bishop. And largely the independent Catholics who were part of his group were theosophists, who were part of this mixing of Eastern and Western religions and philosophies. Some names to know in all of this is James Wedgwood, a former Anglican priest who was ordained by Arnold Harris Matthew. Remember that name from last class? He was consecrated an old Catholic bishop by Samuel Willoughby, then formed the Liberal Catholic Church, which we had just mentioned, whose membership was largely from the Theosophical Society. And then in 1916, he traveled to Australia, where he consecrated Ledbetter. So now we have these two theosophists who are independent Catholic bishops. By 1919, look at the timeline, that's only 3 years later, the Liberal Catholic Church was tarnished with reports of 6 pedophile priests. Wedgwood resigned, continued working for the Theosophical Society in the Netherlands, and he claimed to have visions and conversations with various masters. Remember those wisdom figures from other religions? Ledbetter went on to write some 60 books, and he wrote a liturgy for the Liberal Catholic Church that took out all references to God in human language, right? When the scriptures talk about God walking in a garden, or about Jesus sitting at God's right hand, wait a minute, God is not a human person. So it took out all anthropomorphisms, meaning when we try to make God in our own image. Also took out ideas like the fear of God and the wrath of God. And so these two theosophists, Ledbetter and Wedgwood, gave us an initial footprint in the United States. At one time, there were some 6,000 theosophists who were bringing Eastern and Western religions and philosophies together, and many of them self-identified as independent Catholics as a result of Wedgwood and Ledbetter. So during our summer school, from July the 8th through the 19th, we'll have a session talking simply about this whole liberal Catholic Church movement in the United States, this phenomenon that sort of grew up and flowered and not too soon after that withered.
That's because of World War I.
World War I was finished by then. So it's interesting that there was this interest, though, in world religions. I think it was a bridge too far for many Catholics, with traditional Catholic beliefs, to be thinking about reincarnation and world masters and all these other ideas.
The idea.
It was certainly, for many, it was this sort of like a different religion. While the Roman Catholic Church was preaching damnation and hellfire and God's mortal sin sending you to hell, here were some people who were preaching a loving God. Some of their ideas, though, admittedly, are a little woo-woo. Meanwhile, 1919, following our timeline forward, then 1919, which is the year that the Liberal Catholic Church in the United States essentially was going through some troubles because of the whole pedophile priest scandal that they were going through. That same year, Carmel Henry Carfora succeeded Rudolph de Landis-Burges. Do you remember that name from last class? Arnold Harris Matthew in Great Britain. His successor was Rudolph de Landis-Burges. And Rudolph de Landis-Burges then passed the torch to Carmel Henry Carfora, who is the next head of the North American Old Roman Catholic Church. So here we see a church that's not Roman Catholic, but is taking on a new name, is coming to the United States, and is ministering primarily to immigrant communities. He served that church for nearly 40 years. See that from 1919 to 1958. Carmel Henry Carfora, so he's an important figure in independent Catholic history, and was later succeeded by a man named Hubert Augustus Rogers. Why is that significant? Because Hubert Augustus Rogers was an African American leading a largely white religious body in the 1950s. before desegregation. That was a radical thing.
Yeah.
The story of Carmel Henry Carfora, he led Catholics in Youngstown, Ohio at St. Anthony Roman Catholic Church. Those Catholics wiped the dust off their sandals of the Roman Catholic Church and formed their own community, St. Rocco's Independent National Catholic Church in Youngstown, Ohio in 1907. What we've done here at Holy Family is nothing new, nor so tremendous that all sorts of Catholics in other places have been doing what we've done for much longer than us. And then the last three names to cover this evening, simply so that we've heard them before, are three Roman Catholic bishops who left the Roman Catholic Church in the 20th century, which is not a new thing. I mean, there are over 2,000 bishops in the church. Bishops come and go. What made these bishops unique and why we remember them in independent Catholic history is because after leaving the Roman Catholic Church, after having been consecrated, right, they received apostolic succession through the laying on of hands. And then when they are no longer serving as Roman Catholic bishops, when they decide to consecrate other bishops, those bishops are validly consecrated according to this Augustinian Roman Catholic model of what does it take to validly consecrate a person? One person laying hands on another person. If Bishop Joe Vasquez of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Austin comes here this evening and lays his hands on Becky's head and says, "Becky, I'm consecrating you a bishop," praise the Lord, we now have Bishop Becky with us, and probably both of them would be excommunicated because of the threat that action just caused to the system of the Roman Catholic Church. We have to send a strong signal. Bishop Joe Vasquez, you cannot consecrate anyone without the permission of the Roman Catholic Church.
But we would still be bishops.
But Becky would still be a bishop. Some would argue that Becky's not a bishop because Becky is not a man and only men can be bishops. That's one theology. Another theology is read your Bibles. Right? It's very clear that in the Bible we see the ordained ministry of women. So what do you do? Regardless, if one bishop consecrates another person a bishop, even without Rome's permission, and that's why the Roman Catholic Church came up with this distinction between valid and licit sacraments, simply meaning a valid sacrament means it really happened. Licit means it was illegal, it was not authorized. Bishop Vasquez, we are excommunicating you because what you did, even though it was valid, it was not legal. And our canon law says thou shalt not do that. Who were those three Roman Catholic bishops then, who during the 20th century departed from the Roman Catholic Church and didn't go off quietly, but instead started consecrating other bishops? The first one is Carlos Duarte Costa, who was a Roman Catholic bishop in Brazil. Interestingly, he got on the outs with the Roman Catholic Church because at that time, Pope Pius XII was sympathizing with Roman Catholic Adolf Hitler and with the Nazi regime. Now you've got to imagine the politics of all of this. Here we are on this side of the Alps, but we are in a country that is allied with Germany. Do you remember the politics then? Who was the head of Germany? Adolf Hitler. Who did we have down here in Italy? Mussolini. And so we find ourselves not in the countries of the Allies, but in one of the countries of the Axis powers. And so in order to survive, it's probably best for us here in Rome simply to go along and get along.
And not get arrested.
Yeah. And so they did.
Become complacent.
And Carlos Duarte over in South America, in Brazil, said, wait a minute. Even if Adolf Hitler was a Roman Catholic altar boy, and even if our country is in the middle of this regime, that doesn't mean that we should be colluding with evil. And he spoke out against Rome. And how did Rome react to that? Pope Pius XII excommunicated him. What did Carlos Duarte Costa do? Did he say, oh, okay, well, I'll just go and live a life of praying? No, he said, you consecrated me a bishop. I'm going to continue to be a bishop because Brazil needs bishops and priests, and so he continued to do what he did,
It was still majority.
even if he was outside the Roman Catholic Church.
Yeah.
The name of what developed, so here in the United States, we had those developments going on, but then down in South America, where he found himself, the expression that grew out of that was called ICAB. In independent circles, you'll hear of ICAB, which simply is an acronym for the Igreja Católica Apostólica Brasileira, which in English means the Catholic Apostolic Church of Brazil. He had a new church, which he did not call Roman Catholic. Instead, he said, we are going to call our church the Catholic Apostolic Church of Brazil. Remember the four marks of the church in the creed? We say, I believe in the Holy Catholic, the Holy.
You say Roman Catholic.
Yeah. So some of the marks of the church are that it's apostolic. It traces itself back to the apostles. I, Carlos Duarte Costa, am a Roman Catholic bishop, and I can trace my lineage back to the apostles just like any other Catholic bishop. And we are Catholic. So he had the Apostolic Church, Catholic Church of Brazil, which started and flourished in Brazil. He consecrated 4 bishops from 1945 to 1948. One of them, fascinatingly, we've mentioned before at Mass, Salomão Barbosa Ferraz, became a Roman Catholic bishop. He was an independent Catholic bishop recognized by Rome.
Why? How?
Which seems fascinating, except that you remember that in the 1960s, the Pope was John the 23rd, this radical Pope with this vision of opening up the windows of the church and letting some fresh air in. And so he invited to the Second Vatican Council this bishop consecrated by Roman Catholic Bishop Carlos Duarte Costa. Salomão Barbosa Ferraz was invited to the Second Vatican Council as a bishop of the church. It's a fascinating story. It's the only story that I know of our close relationship as independent Catholics to the Roman Catholic Church. I don't know of any closer relationship than that, and it only lasted a moment. And I think largely that was because of the vision of this man, John the 23rd, the one who called the Second Vatican Council. After the Second Vatican Council, Duarte Costa consecrated 7 more bishops for the Apostolic Catholic Church of Brazil, which means that during his life he consecrated at least 11 other bishops. And today, St. Carlos is often referred to as the patron saint of independent Catholicism. St. Charles of Brazil, we often call him in English, as one who was courageous enough to stand up against the Roman Catholic Church. And even though the Roman Catholic Church excommunicated him for speaking out against the sympathies of the Roman Catholic Church with the Nazi regime, he stood up and continued to exercise his ministry as a bishop for the people of Brazil.
Is it still thriving?
Is it still thriving? It is still existent. There are different people who argue over, which one is really the group that traces it back to here. So there are a few groups. When I went to Utrecht back in 2019, I met a bishop who was like, it's our group that traces itself back to Duarte Costa. And, who knows what's true or not true. I don't have the time to research these things. What I did understand from that is that he was over here visiting the Archbishop of Utrecht, hoping the Archbishop of Utrecht would recognize him as the successor to Carlos Duarte Costa. I sensed that it was a spurious connection, though. What's fascinating about this, though, is that ICAB came 75 years ago. Help me with the math. We're in 2024, 75 years ago. That would be 1949. 1949, during some of our lifetimes, the Catholic Apostolic Church of Brazil came to the United States, 1949, and took another name in English. In English, it became known as Casina, the Catholic Apostolic Church in North America. And so during our summer school, Father Mike Ellis of Casina is going to talk about how it is that they, here in the United States, have been living this expression of independent Catholicism that came from Brazil to the United States 75 years ago. So for 75 years, they have been passing on this Catholic Apostolic Church in North America, which does directly come from Carlos Duarte Costa, or Saint Charles of Brazil, the patron saint of independent Catholics. Imagine the courage there to stand up against your church when your church is doing something wrong.
Mhm.
You know, everyone has to fall in line. If you want to be part of the Mickey Mouse Club, you have to sing the Mickey Mouse song. And he decided to sing the Donald Duck song and called out the Pope and others for being Nazi sympathizers.
The Pope was invalid.
The next Roman Catholic bishop to step outside was a Vietnamese bishop.
Mhm.
So now we're back over in Asia, Vietnam. We're familiar with where that was? Before the Vietnam War, the years leading up to the Vietnam War in 1963, the president of Vietnam was from a very powerful family, the Ngo family, NGO, where the younger brother was the president of Vietnam, and the family was so powerful that his older brother, who had gone to the seminary, was the Archbishop of Vietnam. And what we're going to hear in this story, his name is right there, Pierre Martin Ngo Dinh Thuc. Father Joseph Dang, who is a Vietnamese priest, and I are going to present on him during our summer school. The fascinating story is how it is that this Archbishop of Vietnam is, for various reasons, going to, well, first of all, he's in a very powerful family. And he decides, you know what? I don't need the Roman Catholic Church like other bishops need the Roman Catholic Church. I don't need to sing the Mickey Mouse song like other bishops need to sing the Mickey Mouse song. In fact, leading up to the Vietnam War, Bishop Martin Pierre Ngo Dinh Thuc was the U.S.'s contact in Vietnam. The CIA, who would the CIA talk to get information in Vietnam? They would speak to Archbishop Thuc. He ended up consecrating a man named Clemente Dominguez y Gomez and 4 other bishops in 1976. Again, if you're a Roman Catholic bishop, can you consecrate other bishops without Rome's approval? No, right? And so even though they were validly ordained, they were illicitly ordained, meaning he was not authorized to do that consecration. He was excommunicated for doing that. He later came to regret it because he consecrated this Clemente Dominguez y Gomez, one of the strangest people in independent Catholic history. You can read his Wikipedia page for yourself. He was a blind man who took the name Gregory the 27th of what he called the Palmarian Church. He simply believed that the Pope was in schism, that the Pope at this time, right, was no longer faithful to the Catholic tradition, and so he declared himself the new Pope, the new head of the church. That was during the time of John Paul II. So for those of us who remember those events, when John Paul II was named Pope, this guy declared himself a Pope within days of that. So I think, and then he died almost like the same week or so that John Paul II died. It was this strange coincidence of 2 rival popes, if you will. Right, John Paul II claiming to be the Bishop of Rome, the Pope here, and of Clemente Dominguez y Gomez over in Spain, no relation to Father Roy that I'm aware of, who was over in Spain declaring himself Pope or universal head of the church. He was excommunicated, the Bishop of Vietnam, Ngo Dinh Thuc, was excommunicated again in 1981 for consecrating 3 other bishops. That fancy word that we see in there, sede vacantist. Sede vacantist. What does that mean to be a sede vacantist? Sede vacantist. Sede means a seat. So that, for instance, every diocese has its seat, its center, its cathedral has a chair in it. That chair is called the sede, the bishop's chair. So there's a chair that's empty. Sede vacantists believe that a certain chair is empty. What chair is empty? The chair of Peter. Meaning they believe that the Pope, the Bishop of Rome, is in error, is in heresy, and so is no longer the true Pope. They believe that there is no universal Pope. And so Archbishop Ngo Dinh Thuc over in Vietnam, now believing that the Pope is a heretic, there is no valid Pope. He was a sede vacantist who found himself responsible as a bishop of the church to help lead the church, consecrate other bishops, and to oversee the Catholic Church. Interestingly, though, Nondin Tuk reconciled himself with the Roman Catholic Church in 1984, a story that we previously heard with Vlad and Arnold Harris Matthew. So in Missouri, and Father Joseph Dang has a connection to that monastery in Missouri. He died at that monastery in Missouri in 1984 during many of our lifetimes. The congregation of the Co-Redemptrix in Carthage, Missouri, after reconciling himself during the last months of his life, went back home to the Roman Catholic Church after doing all of this.
They probably offered him health and, lodging to keep him quiet too.
Certainly 3 hots and a cot, right? They give him. He was in a place to live, in the United States of America. He was no longer in Vietnam or other places. So that's the story of the second Roman Catholic bishop. So we had Carlos Duarte Costa here in Brazil, Roman Catholic bishop who split from the Roman Catholic Church. Over here we had Nguyen Dinh Thuc, Vietnamese Archbishop of Vietnam, who split from the church and became a sede vacantist for a long time, consecrating other bishops. And the third and last one is Emmanuel Malingo. Emmanuel Malingo died only in 2021. After the onset of the pandemic, he was in his 90s. He was the Roman Catholic Archbishop of Lusaka, Zambia. An interesting thing, he went off and got married. He married a Korean woman who is the head of the Unification Church. Her name is Sun Myung Moon. The Moonies, they sometimes call that religion.
Reverend Moon.
There you go. And so he married Reverend Moon, and the Roman Catholic Church was like, what do we do about this? What do you do when one of your bishops, or an archbishop in this case, marries not only a woman, but marries the head of a large religious movement in Asia? And so they called him into Rome and they had various conversations. And in the end, for a time, he agreed to separate from his wife. But then it simply came to the place where in 2006, again, this is not long ago, within the last 20 years, 2006, Emmanuel Malingo, this Roman Catholic Archbishop of Lusaka, started Married Priests Now, and that was a definitive break with the Roman Catholic Church. You cannot be part of the Mickey Mouse Club if you sing the Donald Duck song. And so even though he had married, the Roman Catholic Church didn't do any disciplinary action against him until he started Married Priests Now, exclamation point at the end, and consecrated 4 other bishops, again, without Rome's permission. And once he consecrated those 4 bishops, what happened? He was excommunicated. And who was one of those bishops that he consecrated? Do you remember the Phil Donahue show? On the Phil Donahue show, there appeared a Roman Catholic priest from Washington, D.C., whose name was George Augustus Stallings Jr., and Father Stallings announced on the Phil Donahue show that he would no longer, in good conscience, that he could no longer follow the Roman Catholic Church because of its views on contraception and birth control, homosexuality, clerical celibacy, all of these issues. He announced it on the Phil Donahue show, and Emmanuel Malingo consecrated him and 3 others to be bishops. Mm-hmm. So now we had 4 other independent Catholic bishops consecrated by a former Roman Catholic bishop, all validly consecrated, even if illicitly, not authorized. And so what do you do with that? Because a lot of people in our movement, they trace back various lines of apostolic succession. Many of us ultimately trace them back through the Roman Catholic Church because many of us were Roman Catholic and we were ordained and were consecrated in the Roman Catholic Church. And or others will trace their lines of apostolic succession back through people like Carlos Duarte Costa and or Martin Pierre Nguyen Dinh Thuc and or Emmanuel Malingo from Lusaka, Zambia. And now suddenly we have all sorts of independent Catholic bishops and priests and deacons who were ordained outside the Roman Catholic Church, but who continue to share Catholicism with others. Some of them are more conservative expressions, like the Sede Vacantis, certainly an extremely conservative expression of independent Catholicism. Others are much more inclusive. The magazine that we share here at Holy Family, Extraordinary Catholics Magazine, all of those clergy and lay leaders that you see in there are part of this circle. People who believe in this inclusive vision of Jesus and Paula.
So how do we identify within the inclusive umbrella? How do we affiliate, or what? How?
Yeah.
With whom do we affiliate
Yeah.
officially, title-wise?
Yeah.
What is it?
That's an excellent question. So officially, what we are, fancy word here is autocephalous. So the question is, what does it mean to be autocephalous? Auto, self.
Self.
Kephas, in this case, means head. Self-headed. Ooh, think about this for a moment. So, for 6.5 years here in Austin, we first self-identified with the American Catholic Church in the United States. Do you remember that?
Well, that's what I thought.
With Bishop William Johnson, ACCUS. The question is, who did he report to during those 6.5 years? He was self-heading. Now that we've left the ACCUS and haven't yet joined another jurisdiction, like the Catholic Apostolic Church in North America, or like the Ecumenical Catholic Communion, or any of those other jurisdictions that we see in Extraordinary Catholic Magazine, where do we fit? Where do we fall? We are autocephalous. Meaning, in the future, we could decide to join with others, into some jurisdiction, either some jurisdiction that's already existing and or to create something new. But currently, like every other jurisdiction, right? Who does CASINA, the Catholic Apostolic Church in North America, who do they or their presiding bishop report to? They are self-headed. So all these bishops who've been consecrated, validly consecrated, you can belong to a larger organization or not, which is why famously we are, especially here in the United States, independent.
Independent Catholic Church of North America. Is that all right?
It's not incorrect. We are independent. We are independent Catholics.
Independent Catholic Church of North America.
If we were to continue the concentric circles, we self-identify as being inclusive. I self-identify as being an inclusive Catholic priest, right? I'm going to go back to this ancient practice of welcoming women into the sacraments of the church, not judging and excluding people from the Eucharist, etc. The Roman Catholic Church is famous for its wafer wars, for excluding people from the Eucharist. You've been married and divorced? Sorry, can't receive communion. Oh, you're gay? Sorry, you can't receive communion. Right? Oh, you're only 6 years old? Sorry, whatever. Whatever it is that the practice of doing that, we're not going to do that. We're going to follow Jesus and Paul's vision of inclusivity. We are inclusive Catholics. There are other independent Catholics that are not inclusive, especially those who deny the place of women in the sacraments of the church. We're part of the larger independent sacramental movement. Remember that term from 2 weeks ago? Of other independent Anglicans and independent Orthodox and others. And so that's sort of the world that we're in outside of the mainstream churches, right? There's the Church of Rome. There's the Church of Constantinople. There's the Church of Canterbury, the Anglican Church. Yeah, we're not part of those mainstream churches. We are, by the grace of God, independent from them. That's quite some history. I think the dark side of that history is because, especially in these United States of America, where we prize our independence, in fact, we even have a national holiday celebrating our independence, right? In the American spirit, there's something about the American psyche is very independent. And so as a result, here in these United States, the independent Catholic movement is very fractured. There's no unity. During these years, I've been trying to bring folks together and figure out, what can we agree on? Is there anything that all of us, even though we're from different groups and different backgrounds, is there anything that we can agree on? And maybe with the help of with God's help and the promptings of the Spirit, maybe one day we'll get there. Right now, a bit of an update. Last week we piloted a 75-question survey asking clergy from throughout the United States, throughout the English-speaking world, to rate these sentences. Can you agree on these? Tell us for each of these 75 questions. Do you agree with it? Do you have reservations? Are you neutral? Do you not agree, etc.? To be able to see, what is there most agreement on? And we're trying to prepare a presentation during our summer school to sort of summarize, bring together all that data and say, it seems that all of us, though very different, tend to agree on these things.
You need to survey the laity to see if it coincides with
Be fascinating.
clergy.
It'd be fascinating. So that's a bit of independent or inclusive or independent Catholic history as we celebrate the 300th anniversary of independent Catholicism. October 2024 is that first consecration here in Utrecht in the Netherlands by a Roman Catholic bishop of another bishop without Rome's permission, setting in motion this trajectory of independent Catholic bishops outside of the Roman Catholic Church, non-Vatican Catholicism. Non-Vatican Catholicism, we can date to 1724. Yay. If you want to learn more, join us for our summer school, July the 8th through the 19th. We'll have sessions here in the Central Time Zone at 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. We'll publish the schedule, and we'll make sure that everyone has access to it. So if you want to learn more about any of these subjects that we talked about, we'll be talking about Arnold Harris Matthew, we'll be talking about Joseph Rene Villette, we'll be talking about Theosophy and the liberal Catholic Church tradition, we'll be talking about Pierre Martin Nondin Tuc, all sorts of things we'll be learning during those 2 weeks. It is a little high level, but it's fun to gather with others and to learn a bit more about our tradition. Shall we conclude with a prayer? Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and forever shall be, a world without end. Amen. Thank you all for